this night was a night that we had actually, before we had gone to the bars, we did cocaine that night. And so we did some coke, and then we went to the bars and we were drinking on top of that.
We would always wake up the next morning with this regret.
Yeah.
And we would be like, oh no, it happened again. And we were gonna go get some breakfast. We were totally fine with each other at this point. And when we got into the car, we looked up and the whole ceiling of the car was just splattered with blood. And both of us were so beat up, we couldn't really tell whose blood it was. It was probably both of ours. I was raised in the church. My mom made church a very big priority in our lives. It was just kind of expected. It was a pretty firm rule in the household that we would attend church and the youth meetings on Wednesdays and anything else. And my mom did a good job of making sure we grew up knowing Jesus. And if we spent the night at a friend's house, say on a weekend or something, and we didn't make it back in time to go to church, we would be grounded for that whole week until the following weekend when we could attend church. So it was definitely a big priority in our lives. And I grew up experiencing the Holy Spirit, knowing who Jesus was, and getting to see just God work in our lives and in the lives of so many other people as I was growing up. But I was also, so I always knew that God was real. I always knew that, and I never questioned that. But I was also a very insecure kid. My dad wasn't in my life. He chose not to be a part of my life when I was born. So I was just raised with a single mom. And I never really knew how to act as a boy who was growing into a man. I just never really knew. So I was just a really big follower. I would always kind of follow other people's leads. And I describe myself as a chameleon. Like whoever I was around, I was acting like that person. So when I was at church and when I was in a church environment, I was acting like a good Christian. But when I was at school, or when I was just out in the world or whatever, I was just acting by whoever I was surrounded with. And I would talk like them, I would act like them, and yeah, I was just really insecure and lost growing up.
So for me, it was a lot different. I didn't grow up in a Christian household at all. I didn't know God. I didn't know that there was a God or anything like that. I grew up on a reservation over by the Cumberland area. So I was completely different. Like I said, I didn't know God or anything like that. I lived on the reservation for probably the first 10, 11 years. And then my mom actually got into some bad things, into some drugs and stuff, and ended up moving me and my brothers all the way to Minneapolis to go live with a guy that we had never met before and that we didn't know, and we just left my dad. So us being very young, we were just pulled from the only home that we knew, and we were forced to move to Minnesota, and we had no idea. My dad had to come home that day and just find a note on the bed saying that we had left, and he had no idea where we were. And I just lived that life of just not knowing. I wasn't certain of like where we would go next because we jumped a lot house to house. We never had a stable home. We moved around a lot. I hopped back and forth between my mom's house and my dad's house, and I didn't have a very good relationship with either of them. So I feel I just tried to figure out who I was by myself, and it created a lot of problems. I was also a very insecure person, and I was trying to just find out who I was and what this whole thing that we call life was, just searching in all the wrong places.
growing up, I was just trying to figure out, what a man was, and really that's all I was doing was I was chasing how to feel like a man, and I experimented with a lot of different things. I thought maybe it's a masculine thing to like get in trouble. So when I was in school, I got in a lot of trouble with the law, and I got kicked out of my sports teams, which were really important to me. So that impacted me greatly. So then I graduated from high school, and I just kind of wasn't really doing much with my life. I was working here in town, not at a great job, and I was just drinking a lot. I spent most of my days at the bar and just experimenting with other things. I was never like a drug addict or anything, but I would never turn down the opportunity to try something new. So I ended up just experimenting with a lot of different drugs and just drinking a lot, and that was a big part of my life. So I was working at a phone store here in town, and I worked my way up to a manager, and I was managing that store, and once a month we would have to get together for these manager meetings, and all the managers in the district would get together. And I was at the manager meeting, and I was just kind of like, I was probably hungover and wearing wrinkly clothes and just disheveled, and then all of a sudden this girl walked in, and that girl was Sierra. And my first thoughts about Sierra was just how beautiful she was. And I was also really intimidated by her because she was a really good manager, much better than I was. And her store that she was managing would always win all the competitions. It would always outsell my store and everything. And she rolled up to the meeting in a Cadillac, and she just walked in like looking all put together and stuff like that. And so she caught my eye because I realized how beautiful she was, but at the same time I was like, she's definitely out of my league. So
yeah, with the bouncing back and forth with my mom and everything like that, and bouncing back and forth with my dad, I got into the wrong crowd when I lived in Minneapolis and hung out with the wrong people there and did bad things. And it was the same for me. I never was like a drug addict or anything like that, but I definitely drank a lot and experimented with things too. Not crazy things, but I definitely tried them. And just from, the stuff I seen a lot of things that a lot of people probably shouldn't see growing up. And just from those things, I feel I carried this weight on my shoulder. Like I had to do better. I had to. And so I tried to do better. And I was with a guy, and we ended up getting pregnant. And that's when I had Aubrey, our oldest daughter, Aubrey. And so again, I was job to job, trying to find a better job for our family and provide and stuff like that. And I got hired at a job at Verizon, and just like him, I worked my way up to a manager position. And like he said, we had met at these manager meetings, and it's funny because he says that he probably showed up in like a wrinkly shirt and hungover, but for some reason I was drawn to that. I was really drawn to his looks as well, and his personality. And for those of you who don't know, he's pretty funny sometimes. And I was drawn to him also, and we had to exchange phone numbers. And so I actually had added him on Snapchat, and I started Snapchatting him, and we just started talking. And then that's how we started dating. We just, through Snapchat, good old Snapchat and Verizon.
That's right.
Our love story.
That's where all of the best love stories start. Yeah, so to my surprise, she started Snapchatting me, and we kind of built a relationship that way. And then before I knew it, we were just talking 24/7. And then we started hanging out and everything. And after some time, I was able to meet her daughter, Aubrey. And then immediately I fell in love with Aubrey. And we were hanging out, and then we decided to move in with each other. So we got our own place together. We weren't married at the time or anything. And I think we felt like we were in love, but we were probably more, and I think we probably did love each other, but it was rooted in lust. And we just kind of based everything off of this physical attraction that we had to each other. And then, of course, both of us brought all of our insecurities from just our personal lives and from growing up. We brought those into the relationships as well. And so at first, when we first started living together and like really dating seriously, at first it was awesome because it was just physical and it was new and it was exciting. And so at first it was awesome. But then once that stuff started to kind of wear out and we got into the more serious like depth of the relationship, then we started to run into some problems. And like I said, we were just both so insecure with ourselves and probably both hurt a lot in the past, and neither of us trusted people very well. So, and then on top of it, we were both drinking a lot. Like that was a huge part of our relationship, was just like going out to bars and drinking.
So when I had met Jake, I was, like he said, I drove up in a Cadillac and it seemed like I was all put together, but on the inside, I wasn't at all. I was very, very insecure, just from like the trauma from my childhood and things that happened to me growing up. I carried a lot of that with me, and I didn't know how to deal with any of it because I was never told how to. I never really had parents that were there to show me or tell me any of that. So I carried all of that with me. So when I met Jake and we started dating and stuff like that, like he said, I was really, really insecure. I always thought he wanted something else. You know, there was a phase where I was blonde at one time because I was like, oh, Jake likes blondes more than brunettes, so I'm gonna dye my hair blonde to be a blonde person. And so I tried that for a season, and that obviously wasn't it. So, and it went deeper than that even. I recall one time when we were out drinking, and we had obviously got in a fight because that's all drinking ever did back then. When we would go out to bars and stuff, it would just lead to fights. I physically stole his phone, and he lived in Rice Lake and I lived in Spooner. Or no, we were living together. No. There's a few times this happened, but one really bad time was when we weren't living together yet, and I was in Spooner and he was in Rice Lake, which is like a 20-minute drive, but I stole his phone. Like I took his phone and he was passed out, so I'm like, oh, I have at least 2 hours to go through his phone. And I went through every single crack of his phone. Like I read things that people shouldn't even read. Like I went back to messages from like 2005. Like why that mattered, I don't know, but I needed to know about his relationships and what he did back in 2005. And I would do that like on the regular. He would go to the bathroom quick and I would quickly, look at his phone and look at his recent apps and his web history and his text messages and stuff like that. And I was just in a very negative, insecure spot with myself, so I felt that I needed to constantly be hovering over him to see what he was doing, to make sure he wasn't cheating on me, to make sure he wasn't, talking to other people or whatever, just looking for something else, because I was so insecure in myself. I never felt worthy of being loved, or I never felt like I was good enough for him, so I was constantly trying to just be good enough for him. And it was hard. So I definitely put him through a lot more than I needed to. And we couldn't even go to a store. Like we would go into Walmart, and it got so bad where Jake would like walk through Walmart with his head down because we'd get in the car and he would know that we would start fighting, because like an attractive person would walk by, which there's attractive people out there, but they would walk by and I'm sure he knew in his head, like, oh crap, this is gonna start a fight, like there's an attractive person in Walmart, And we would get in the car and I would just chew him out. Like I would just lay it on him, like, you were checking out that girl, like blah, 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 just going off on him. And he's like, what are you talking about, you know? So it got to a point where he literally had to walk through stores with like his head down because he wanted to avoid those fights.
Yeah. Yeah, and it just felt really suffocating. And on both of our ends, like we were just both insecure. We both assumed we weren't worthy of love, and we just assumed that we were going to get hurt. So, I mean, I did a lot of insecure things as well. And I think part of it too was sometimes maybe we did things on purpose to try to make the other one jealous, because then we would know that they loved us, or then we would feel loved. If we could get like a reaction out of each other, then I think that was love to us. We're like, oh, they reacted this way, they're jealous because I did this or whatever, so they must love me, they must care about me. So it was just a lot of that stuff at first was kind of how it started. But then after that went for some time, it kind of evolved to the next step, and we just felt we just started to kind of resent each other because of how we made each other feel all the time, and because of the crazy accusations that we were always laying on each other and stuff. We just kind of started to resent each other. So then our fights kind of moved up to the next notch, and we would be very verbally abusive to each other, especially if we were drinking or something. I mean, then we had no control over our words or over our emotions or what we did or what we said. And we would just try our hardest to cut the other one down and hurt each other. And I definitely called her every single swear word in the book. I called her every name you could call a woman. I accused her of things that I knew she wasn't doing, but I knew that it would hurt her. I knew so much about her. We knew so much about each other that we would like use our past to hurt the other one. And we would just bring in stuff like that to our fights. And they would be very verbally abusive. Stuff that I would never say to anybody. The meanest things that I've ever said to someone were to Sierra, were to my wife. But we weren't married at the time. What do you think about that stage?
Yeah, so the verbal abuse, like he said, it was really bad, and he pretty much said it all. We called each other every name in the book, and since I knew the story about his dad, you know, I would throw it in his face like, oh, your dad just left you, and because we knew how to get under each other's skin, and we knew like what would really, really hurt. So we went low, like the lowest places you could go, we went with like our words, and
like, you're just like your dad, or you're just like your mom, or whatever, you know.
Yeah, and we would just keep going at it until eventually like one of us stormed off, or the one's crying, or you know, we would just go, and
Yeah, so then after that went on for some time, after a while we got so numb to it and so used to it that our words didn't really cut as deep, and we couldn't get that rise or that reaction out of the other one with our words anymore. And that was really what we wanted, you know, because like I said, I think that that's what made us feel loved, is if we could get the other one, if we could get a reaction out of each other, then we knew that they cared. So after a while, the words just didn't have the sting like they used to, and we had said everything we could say. And we were still drinking heavily, and kind of centering our life around the bars and drinking, and still experimenting with other things and other substances and stuff like that, and not taking in the most healthy things into our bodies or just into our spirits or anything. Like anything we were consuming was kind of toxic and high drama at that time. So then it kind of evolved again, and then we started actually getting in physical fights with each other and physical altercations. And we'd go out to the bar, and you know, we'd see someone at the bar or something, and we would throw an accusation out, and then it would very quickly turn to a physical altercation where we'd be hitting each other. There were times where we'd have to call in sick to work because our faces were so beat up that we knew that we couldn't show up to work. Our coworkers would know exactly what was going on. I remember one of the worst fights that we got in. We had won front row tickets to a concert in the Twin Cities. And it should have been this fun, awesome time, a night out together. But we went there and we went bar hopping before the concert, and we were just taking tequila shots and heavy liquor and stuff like that. And by the time we got to the concert, we were just
gone.
Yeah, we were very intoxicated, and we were just fighting with each other, and we weren't able to stay through the whole concert because we just weren't having a fun time at all. So we left in the middle of the concert that we won tickets to.
Front row.
Yeah, and then on our way home from the cities, it's like a 2.5, 3 hour drive. We were just beating each other up the whole way. I remember reaching over and like hitting her as I'm driving, and her doing the same thing to me. And I remember pulling into some random person's driveway and trying to get her out of the car so that I could just leave her there. And she ended up losing a shoe. So some random person just found a shoe in their driveway the next morning. And we were so blackout drunk, like we couldn't even remember all of this stuff. It took a while for us to fully remember what happened that night. But the next morning, so eventually we got home and passed out, and then we woke up the next morning and we were just both all beat up. Our faces were all beat up, and we decided we were gonna go get some breakfast, because that's how it would work. Like once the alcohol wore off and everything, we would always wake up the next morning with this regret.
Yeah.
And we would be like, oh no, it happened again. And we were gonna go get some breakfast. We were totally fine with each other at this point. And when we got into the car, we looked up and the whole ceiling of the car was just splattered with blood. And both of us were so beat up, we couldn't really tell whose blood it was. It was probably both of ours. But yeah, like I said, when we would get in those physical altercations, we would regret it the next day. The alcohol would wear off. We'd wake up the next day. We'd regret it. We would say we were sorry to each other. And then we would set a goal, and we'd be like, we're going to go this long without getting in a fight. And sometimes we would make it a few weeks or a few months, and we'd be like, oh, we're over it. We're good now. But eventually we would always like relapse, I guess, and get into another big fight. We were just kind of sweeping all of our problems under the rug. We never really handled any of our insecurities or any of our problems.
Yeah. Yeah, so like he said, we drove home from the cities that night, and we shouldn't have been driving. We were both very, very intoxicated. We drank, we would drive and drink all the time. We would drive drunk all the time, and yeah, that was probably one of our worst fights that we got in. And I think for me, sometimes Jake wouldn't give me the reaction I would want when we would get in like physical fights. So there was multiple times where I would like hit him over and over and over and over again until he like hit me back. So then we could actually like get going, because I wanted that, like I wanted the adrenaline we got from it. And sometimes I feel like we did it too because we thought, like again, like with the verbal abuse, it was like not that we saw that as like, oh, they love me because they're hitting me, but like, oh, they're giving me the attention, they're giving me, they're doing something, like I'm getting a reaction from them versus just like getting nothing at all. And there was another time too where we got in a really, I would probably say it was our worst fight. It was, I think, our last physical fight too, where it was brutal. Again, we had gone out to the bars that night because that was just our thing. We'd go to the bars and just see people, and fights would happen. And we didn't even have to see people like that for things to happen. We just would, for me, like I would hang on to things, and I would be like, a year ago, like you said this or you did that, and I would bring that up, or like a year ago you liked this girl's picture or something like that, and it wasn't even when we were dating, so it wasn't even like, it didn't matter, but I would bring those things up, and I would keep going back to the past and like bring it up, even though when we would make up, I would tell him, oh, I won't bring it up anymore, like it's fine, I let it go. But when we would drink, those things would come to surface for me, and I would let them go and just go off on him. And this night was a night that we had actually, before we had gone to the bars, we had did we did cocaine that night. And so we did some coke, and then we went to the bars and we were drinking on top of that. And then I don't even know what happened that caused the fight that night, but we got home and we just started hitting each other because that's what we did. And for some reason, when we would fight, I would like take all of his clothes and just like throw them out in the yard or in the garage, and I would like take pictures and throw them on the ground and break them. And like we would wake up the next morning and our house would be trash, where we couldn't walk on our floor because there was glass shattered. Like I have a scar on my foot from when I threw a picture. I think it was an autographed Vikings thing that he got or something from a banquet or something we went to, and I threw it and the glass like somehow came up and sliced my foot. But so I would do that a lot. I would break a lot of things, and we would just trash the house. And one of our worst nights was that night that we did the cocaine, we drank, we came home, we got in a physical fight, and I remember I called one of my friends, and I don't remember if you called your parents or if I did. I don't know, but his parents had showed up that night, and because we, again, broken bones, we were bloody, it was 3 a.m. at this time, and they were called, and my friend picked me up, and we went to the hospital, and Jake stayed with his parents, and then I'll let you share that with like what, when
so that was one of our worst physical fights, and we did call my parents. I think maybe you called my parents because you were freaked out at just how physical we were being in this particular fight. And then they didn't know what to do, so they called one of the pastors from our church, and Pastor Jake came over, and this was at like 2 or 3 a.m, and he just he took me away from the house, and I was just reclined in his seat, just drunk and on cocaine and just muttering all kinds of nonsense, and he was just there for me, and he just loved me through it. And I just remember he drove kind of all over the county with me and stopped and got me some coffee. And once he confirmed that Sierra was out of the house, and because we had to be separated that night, so then he kind of brought me back home. And yeah, that was probably one of our worst fights, yeah. So we kind of went through this struggle for quite a while, and we tried a lot of things to fix it. We tried just going to counseling, just a secular counselor, and they gave us some like pamphlets on how to be a better listener to each other and stuff like that, but it didn't really fix our issues that we were having. We would try to just not drink, and we would go for a few weeks or so here or there not drinking, and everything would be fine. So we'd be like, I think we're good now, we can go drink again and stuff. But then eventually the same stuff would happen. Well, then we got into a rough spot financially. And at this point we had our first daughter together, Layla. So we had Aubrey, and then we had Layla now. And we were just in a really bad spot financially, and I remember I didn't have enough money to pay our rent one month, and I didn't know what to do. And so I called my mom, and I told my mom the situation I was in, and I asked her if she would spot me some money so that I could pay the rent that month. And that was probably a rock bottom point for me, because as a new dad and everything, I'm supposed to be the provider, of the household. And here I was calling my mom and asking for help to pay my bills. And that was really just kind of emasculating and demoralizing for me. So my mom said, being the woman of faith that she is, and she knew about all these fights we were having and all that, she said, I'll give you the money. She's like, you don't have to pay me back. Because initially I asked her if I could just borrow some money. She said, I'll give you the money to catch you up on your rent, but I'd like you to come to church with me and tithe. Because she said, growing up, being a single mother, or when I was growing up and she was a single mother, she got into some pretty tight spots financially, but she always trusted God through it, and she always tithed, and she was a faithful tither at church. And things would always seem to work out, like these crazy miracles. Like when she would have no money in her account, all of a sudden an envelope would be waiting for her in the back of the church with like just the right amount of money that she needed for her bills and stuff. And so she always trusted God with her finances. And I obviously wasn't serving God at all at this point in my life. As soon as I moved out of my mom's house, I kind of got away from all of that and was just trying things out on my own. And so she said, I'll lend you the money, but I'd like you to come to church and I'd like you to tithe. Even if you don't have much to give, I'd like you to tithe. So I kind of told Sierra the deal, and I was like, my mom said she would give us the money, but this is kind of her stipulation for her doing it, and I think we kind of have to do it because we really need this money. So we went to church with her, and it just so happened that when we went to church, they were just starting a series. It was like a 3 or 4 week series on relationships. And everything that the preacher was saying that day, we felt like she was speaking directly to us. And it was like every single thing that we needed to hear, for what we were going through at that time, just with all of our fighting and with everything. And the thing that stood out to us, I think, well, do you want to share that?
Sure, yeah. What stood out, I think, well, especially for me, because like I said, I didn't grow up in a church background, and I didn't know these people in this church and things like that. So I think what stood out to me, and like he said, and us probably, was the pastor was actually like, love is a choice, not a feeling. And so I feel like when she said that, it just hit me different. Like I was like, okay, like she obviously doesn't know what we're going through. She doesn't know about our relationship. She does, and just the fact that our whole relationship was based on feeling. Like it was based on our feelings, and that was it. Like nothing else, just feelings, So the fact that she had said that, it just, like I said, it hit different. And when we left church that day, we were like, okay, like something was different.
Yeah, when she said that, it hit us differently. And I think we realize now that it went right through our ears and into our spirits, and it landed into our spirit. And it was, like she said, it was what we needed to hear. And we had based everything up to that point off of feeling. And we weren't choosing to love each other. We were only going to show love to the other one if they made us feel good. And if they weren't making us feel good, we weren't going to. So we realized love the biblical way and the way that God loves. And like she said, when we left church that day, we felt good. We didn't feel like fighting. We felt like going out to eat as a family. And it was a really good feeling. We hadn't felt that way maybe ever. And so we decided we wanted to keep on coming back, at least till the end of this relationship series, because we were getting so much out of it. So we kept coming back, and we kept listening, and every single time we went, we kept getting more just gold nuggets that we needed to hear, that we needed in our lives every single time. And we always left feeling good, and we weren't really fighting too. We found we weren't really fighting when we would go. And so that just made us want to get even more involved. And I think we started going to cell groups. The church has small groups, and we started going to those. And we just started getting involved more and more. And we were still tithing every time we would go. We didn't have much to give, but we just did what my mom said, and we just tithed what we could. And then after a few months of this, maybe after 3 or 4 months of doing this, and now we're going regularly, and we're going to the small groups, and we're tithing every single week, I saw this job posting for a job, and it listed the salary, and it was triple what I was making at the time. And I knew I wasn't qualified for it. I had a DUI on my record, and this job involved a lot of driving. And I had just been turned down from a job at a dealership a car dealership. I was going to try to be a car salesman, but they couldn't hire me because my driving record was so bad that their insurance wouldn't cover me just to move cars around on the lot. And this job was like driving full time for a company. So I was like, I know I'm not qualified for it, but this salary would fix all of our financial problems that we're going through right now. So just on a whim, I put my application in, and I found out later that dozens of people applied for this position. And I was one that made it through to the interview, and I made it through to the interview, and I really connected with my boss, and it felt really comfortable, and I could tell he really liked me. And I'll never forget, well, I just kept making it through to the next round, and out of dozens of people that applied, and I was probably the least qualified, they offered me the job. And I remember my boss telling me, you're not qualified for it, but I feel like you're a diamond in the rough, so I'd like to give you an opportunity. And I just knew that I knew that it was an opportunity from God, and that God was working, and that God had orchestrated this whole thing. And everything worked out just like how my mom told me it would too. Like, we started going to church, we started making God the foundation of our finances, and then he took hold of those things, and then he just fixed all of those situations. And then seeing that, we just wanted to make God the foundation of everything, of every area of our lives. So we dove right in. We started doing couples counseling with our pastors, and we decided we wanted to do things the biblical, godly way. And so we got married, and we started raising our kids in the foundation of God and in the foundation of his word and the Bible. And just like with our financial situation, we just saw God work in all of those areas, and in a way that we couldn't deny. Like, it was a way that it was miraculous. It could only be God. Then, like I said, we just started making him the foundation of everything that we could. And we started seeing those same things happen in those areas.
Yeah.
What would you think?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing too. Not growing up in a church background, and not, knowing about like the Spirit Man and like the Holy Spirit and all that kind of thing, all those kind of things. I feel for me when I was in church, because I wasn't baptized or anything at that point. For me, when I was there, I don't know, like something was so. It was so intense. Like, when you get that like nervous feeling, and your like heart is pounding, and you get the butterflies in your stomach and all of that stuff. When the pastor was speaking, my mind was just like blown away. And I was just like, okay, like like I don't know God, but I want to give God a shot, and I want to know more about God, because if us coming here this one time, like we hear these things, like obviously God is like trying to pursue us, and like what's it gonna hurt to try, know? So I wanted to give it a shot, because it was a feeling that I had never felt before. It was a feeling that I had never felt from when we would call each other names, when we would beat each other up, when when I was dyeing my hair all these different colors, when I was buying all these different clothes. Like, it was a feeling that was so satisfying compared to all of the other things that I had searched for that feeling in.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point too, just like the way we felt that first time we went to church, and it felt like everything they were saying was just specifically for us. I think another thing that we felt inside of us was conviction.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a negative thing. It was like a positive thing. It was like, oh, I needed to hear this stuff.
Yeah.
I need to change these areas. I need to improve these areas. But it wasn't in a condemning way or anything like that. It was in a really, really positive way. Like you said, it felt like you felt great to the core of you.
Yeah.
You just felt great.
Like, I didn't leave there feeling like they were so mean, like they were mean, and they hurt my feelings, or, it was nothing like that. It was like, wow, like that was so good. Like, I needed that. It's like when you eat a really good meal on Thanksgiving, and you're like so satisfied, and you're like, that's so good.
Yeah.
That's what it was like. We left there, and we were satisfied. We were so satisfied.
That's a good way to put it. And I think maybe something we should go into in a little more depth too is when we started counseling with the pastors too.
Yeah.
Because that was when we really started to see God get us through all of our junk and mend our relationship. Because when we started couples counseling with our pastors, you know, they taught us the word and what the word says about love and forgiveness and unconditional love. And one thing that the pastor had us do, which was so weird, but
It was so weird.
it made such a big difference, was see our whole relationship, we would get in these fights and then we would just sweep it under the rug. And then the next day we would go out to breakfast and whatever. And our pastor held us accountable, and he made us look each other in the eyes. He'd make us stand up, and then every single thing we could think of.
Yeah, like down to the word, like a word we called each other.
Yeah, every fight, everything that we were holding on to in our memory, he asked us to talk about it, and we'd bring it up. And after we would talk about it, we would stand up, we'd look at each other, we'd forgive each other. We'd have to say the words, "I forgive you." And then we would have to, and then after that, he goes, "Now it's put to rest.
Yeah.
Now you guys don't ever have to bring that up again." And that's really what got us through a lot of our stuff too, was real forgiveness. Isn't like just forgetting about it for a while, but then bringing it up the next time you're mad. He made us go through every hard situation that we could think of that we had put each other through. And he made us apologize face to face, looking in each other's eyes, and then hug each other after each thing. And that was probably like 2 or 3 of the sessions right there, was because we had done so much to each other, was just forgiving each other for every single one of those things and just putting them to rest. And another big event that happened was when we got baptized too. I had gotten baptized when I was a kid, but I had gone so far away from God. I wasn't living for Him. I just felt the need to redo it, and as an adult, you know, when I really understood the commitment that I was making to God by doing that. And so we got baptized together on Easter Sunday, I think it was. And that was a big moment too. In 1 year, so from the time I borrowed money from my mom to just over a year, probably from a year from the first time we went to church, just over a year, we went from not being able to pay our bills, and we actually moved in with a family friend with our kids. We were living with a family friend, and in 1 year, just by going to church and tithing and kind of doing that kind of stuff, we went from living with a family friend, not being able to pay bills, to buying a house, a good house for our family, you know.
So we did a lot of counseling with the pastors. It was a lot of sessions together where we did them together, but it was a lot of individual sessions as well, because when we were together, we had obviously brought junk from my life and from Jake's life, so we brought them together. So we had also met with the pastors to just go through our junk individually and let things go just like that. And so we did all of that, and like Jake said, pastors had us do some crazy things that at the time were like, we were laughing, I think, in some of them.
Uncomfortable.
But he's like, no, take it seriously, you guys. And once we did, things were shifting, the atmosphere was shifting, and like you could just feel the weights coming off of our shoulders, you know, because we were hanging on to so much. We were hanging on to all the words we said to each other. We were hanging on to all the fights that we got into with each other. We were hanging on to the pride, the hate, you know, because at one point I think we like hated each other. I don't want to say hate because that's a hard word, but like we really disliked each other, you know. And I feel, you know, by us acknowledging those things, like, you know, saying, yes, I did this and I'm sorry I made you feel this way. And then him being like, I forgive you for doing that. You know, it was good. It was so good. And I feel like every part of us needed that, and it was a way for us to grow, because you know how uncomfortable it is to have to sit in front of your pastors and be like, I'm sorry for watching porn, I'm sorry for doing drugs, I'm sorry for drinking and hitting you, I'm sorry for, you know, like that's hard stuff to do.
I'm sorry for calling you the B word, but he would make me say the word.
Say the actual word.
And then you would have to say, I forgive you for calling me that.
And for every single thing, and it was so worth it though. Like I would do that a million times over, just because of like the fruit that we gained from that, and just how much more it pushed us out of our comfort zone, but it helped us grow, you know. And like Jake said, then we were baptized shortly after that, and I was never baptized. I didn't even know what that meant, and after them explaining it to us and stuff like that, you know, we were able to be a new person. We were a new creation, you know, and the old me was gone. Like all of my insecurities, my past, my shame, my guilt, everything that I went through as a child, everything that I did in high school, everything, it was gone. Like Jesus looked at me and I was just clean, you know, I was perfect in his eyes. And I don't know, it's an amazing feeling just when we did that. And the fact that we did it together, I feel like that itself like was a symbol of something, because we did it together. Like we took a stand together, kind of like when you get married, you know, like you're making that commitment together. But we did it like our rebirth, you know, we were made new together. And so like our relationship was made new because
no relationship is too far gone for God to fix. And that he can take any relationship, no matter how rough of shape it's in, no matter how far gone it is, and he can turn that relationship from a toxic relationship to a healthy one. And I don't like talking about perfect marriages, because I don't think a perfect marriage ever exists. Like me and Sierra, and that's one thing I want to be very clear. Me and Sierra, just like any married couple or with any marriage, we come into obstacles, we come into disagreements, and you know, we'll make mistakes or whatever. But the difference now is that we can get through those things, and we don't revert back to our old ways, and we have healthy boundaries in place that God helped us put in place. And we have lines that we will not cross, and we don't, you know, we can have a disagreement now, and
without things being broken all over the floor, and yelling, and hitting.
It not end up being a knockdown, drag out fight, or a fist through the wall, or a mean name being called.
I want to really push on the being perfect, and I feel even us, like we strive so hard, we pushed so hard to have that perfect relationship, and the more you are trying to push for that perfect relationship, the even it's going to get even worse after that, you know, because like no marriage, no relationship is perfect. And once we were able to realize that we are going to have disagreements, we're not going to always get along, you know, and sometimes we need space, and that's okay, and that's healthy to be like, okay, I'm gonna leave for a little bit, where before, if you would leave, I would have 75 phone calls to his phone, like, where are you, what are you doing, you know. But like now it's like, no, it's okay to have that space, it's okay to do things by yourself, it's okay to put, like he said, to have boundaries in place, because that's what helps you, you know. And by making God that center of your relationship, and by always going back to the Word and going back to what He says, you know. Jake does these whiteboard talks a lot of the time with our kids, where, you know, if they have a question about something, or if he even feels something on his heart that God has put on his heart, he will make a whiteboard discussion with them, and he will show them like what the Word says on this whiteboard, and he'll just sit on the couch with this, it's like an actual whiteboard, and sit there and he'll explain it to them. And I just feel like, even for me, even though sometimes he's doing it for the kids, like it's for me sometimes, you know, and just knowing the Word is so true, that I've searched so many places, we've searched so many places, and just when we look at the Word and when we go back to God and when we seek God first in those things, like we will always get the answer that we are needing and that we are wanting, because it's only Him that can fill that empty spot in our heart. And when we look elsewhere, we're never going to find it. So don't look for perfect, just look for God in those situations and trust him, and just know that he is faithful, and he'll get you through it. Because I mean, we should either probably be dead. One of us should be dead. I mean, we almost pushed each other out of a car, you know, when we were driving and drunk, or one of us should be in jail. Like, out of all those fights, like, the cops were never called. And I truly believe that it was like God had his hand over us that whole time. Like, he was watching over us and he was protecting us, because he knew that there could be so much fruit from us. And he knew once we chose to love each other instead of basing it on feelings, that it would be okay.
Yeah, so anybody can have a healthy marriage or a healthy relationship with God as the foundation. And it's not going to be all roses and sunshine, but he'll get you through any tough time that you come into.
Yeah.